rocket. So it starts from here, Blue Origin feather. The whole story about that was that the inspiration, something that is Earth centric, is flying, birds, the way birds evolved on Earth. And if we went and met an alien civilization, a symbol of what it is to be from Earth would be a feather, because it's probably one of the finest examples of evolutionary engineering. And so that is the symbol of the company. And the motto is, we are of blue origin. So apparently, because also the Earth is mostly water. So the water
I had no idea.
and the feather. Those are.
I always thought, because I had heard, I had conversations with people who also love following this new period of space exploration that we're entering, that the reason behind the Blue Origin feather is because when the capsule lands, it's supposed to be float down and land as smooth as a feather. That was one of our biggest guesses, and now I know it's not right. This is even better.
I love it.
Love it. I love it. I love the whole thing.
Know.
I love the whole story. That's fantastic.
It's a really cool rocket, but I reckon it has to be at least twice as big for humans to fit inside that little compartment.
A very Zoolander thing.
This compartment
will
fit six humans. So we can fit 6 small humans in here, and the seating is spectacular. And the seating is designed to collapse and buckle under each passenger if there's a failure of the thrust termination system, which is a series of jets that line the bottom of this ring, the ring being the interface ring to the top of the propulsion module. And those jets create a puff of air. So when you hit the ground, the puff of air creates a tiny pillow of air, nitrogen, a tiny pillow of nitrogen that takes you from about 25 kilometers per hour to 0 kilometers per hour in a very controlled manner. So it's a bump, but it's a soft bump, if you will, as much as you could make it with a pillow of nitrogen.
That's so damn cool.
I want one.
And there is an escape motor, which has helped us very much. There's a 70,000 pound thrust escape motor in the center of this. So here where the magnet which is not here, but is for this model, would be the exhaust for the escape motor. And the escape motor is ducted. There are 4 small motors that control the thrust direction, so that the escape motor can actually be sent in a specific direction away from the propulsion module if there is some reason that the propulsion module is exploding, which has occurred. And so in that case, we would have a controlled escape with thrust vector control, thrust vector correction.
Nice.
So there's a lot of technology up there.
Okay.
There's a lot, and it's really cool. I feel like we were aiming to do like a very brief continuation of the chat that we're having before we hit record, but I just realized for folks listening at home, they've just heard 4 minutes of fantastic rocket-based discussion with no idea who this
move to a better internet.
additional who this additional voice is that they're hearing. And they are indeed hearing not only the dulcet tones of myself and Benjamin, but this week we have a guest joining us today. Yes. We have a very first guest joining us. Dimos Katsis from Blue Origin is here, and he's been telling us about the way that the crewed module of the Blue Origin rocket works. Before we go any further, Dimos, would you like to give a bit of an intro to the folks listening at home, in addition to that wonderful discussion of the rocket?
Yes. So my name is Dimos. I studied electrical engineering in the United States at Virginia Polytechnic Institute, or otherwise known as Virginia Tech. I had a variety of sort of long and winding roads around alternative and hybrid vehicles, alternative energy, solar power. I built solar powered cars while I was in college and raced those. And so I've always been interested in getting out and making the world a little different, a little better place, a little different in its transportation. I also got a chance to work on hybrid electric buses with General Motors and worked at GE for a little while, and then decided to just consult and kind of do my own thing. My love is solar power. I love solar power. I love alternative energy. So rockets, not something I was particularly interested in throughout my career, and really only came upon it because I needed a full-time job once I got married and I had a kid. And it would help if I didn't have to travel so much. And sure enough, here comes Blue Origin. Perfect. I can get a nice, easy desk job designing electronics for the rocket and not have to worry about much else. But I found out that it was actually kind of interesting what they were doing. So here I am talking about it with great joy and great enthusiasm. And part of that is there's a lot of energy right now in going back to the moon, going to Mars. Um, Different philosophies abound, and so for me, my philosophy is we've got to make the world a cleaner place, a better place. And so for me, alternative energy still, electric vehicles, it's always going to be my first love. But for this kind of stuff, definitely a place to push some of the technologies, especially in the electrical engineering, where we talk about reliability and all the stuff that you need to make a rocket come and go from space 25 times, supposed to be used 25 times.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot that has to happen to make electronics survive the kinds of crazy environments, the cold, the heat, the vibration, the occasionally there's a hydrogen fire that starts under this thing after it lands because it's busy venting its gases, and sometimes it doesn't shut off the engine in time while it's venting hydrogen, which is sort of the last thing left in the tank. And then there will be a hydrogen fire, but you can't see hydrogen in the visual spectrum. So you can only see it when the infrared cameras are on, and you see this massive fireball coming out of the bottom of the unit after it's landed. I don't know if you've linked to any videos yet, but there's some lovely videos on the Blue Origin website, as well as on YouTube, showing the landing process for this rocket. And we can move forward on that. I don't want to overload our podcast with my particular discussions here. So let's talk. Let's have some questions.
I mean, like I kind of am at the point where I'm not overloaded. I feel like a kid in a candy store because I have my brain running in every direction at the same time. And it's so fascinating how you ended up there. But I'm really curious. Like, obviously, the main aspect of renewability comes from the fact that the rockets themselves are renewable. I mean, there's always that comparison that people make to commercial aviation, where they say, well, if the plane just crashed every time you flew from New York to LA, like that would be super inefficient and terrible for the environment. So it's great that folks like companies like Blue Origin and SpaceX are working on the reusability of the rocket. But I'm curious, what sort of technologies are you implementing in order to make these components as reliable as possible, to allow them to be used 25 times and to withstand those insane, pressure and temperature conditions?
Well, there's a couple of things that make the engine particularly susceptible to failure early on. And some of that involves the development of the metal alloys that are used to make the nozzle sustain the cooling and heating. A great analogy of what a rocket engine does is boiling. Imagine you made a cup out of ice cream, and then you were tasked with boiling water in that cup made out of ice cream. And that's essentially the thermal balance we're creating. One of the ways that you can boil that water in a cup made of ice cream would be to create a tiny ribbon of air that keeps the water in the cup from actually touching the ice cream. And so we we inject a ribbon of unburned fuel that creates a slipstream around the combustion, the controlled explosion, and that protects the side walls. Hey, you. That protects the side walls. I've got this stuffy here from the another passenger. It protects the sidewalls of the rocket engine from destruction and melting. Um, and that is part of the design. The other is a stable combustion environment. And so a lot of research went into, and this was true with the Apollo program as well, back in the 50s and 60s when the F1 engine was being developed for the Apollo rockets that took men to the moon. That engine had a combustion chamber that would inject hydrogen and oxygen. In that case, I think that engine burned kerosene.
Mhm.
This engine burns hydrogen and oxygen. But injecting those, and we call it an injector plate, and the point is to create this very, very clean mix of fuels and oxidizer just being oxygen, and then to make it so that the powerful force of this controlled explosion doesn't have tiny little resonances or noises. It's just one continuous, lovely tone that pushes through the nozzle and creates this flow of heat and pressure that can push on the rocket up into space.
Wow.
If you're creating that protective layer to prevent the ice cream cup from melting, but you create the protective layer with fuel, how does that not
Yes.
ignite?
So one of the things that happens is fuel has a variety of temperatures of ignition. You can have a region where you're fuel rich and oxygen poor. In that place, the fuel doesn't get enough oxidizer to burn. And then you can have other regions where you're so oxygen rich and so fuel poor that the temperature of the oxygen never goes up fast enough for it to be considered a very powerful burn. So you can either inject an excess amount of oxygen around the rings that comprise the various levels of this cup as it expands, because we also have this expanded sort of, it's kind of like a half dome. If you look up into the nozzle of a rocket, you'll see what sort of looks like a dome, a paraboloid. If you take a cross section, it looks like a parabola on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to allow the fire to expand, but to also allow the speed to increase as we go down. Remember, we need to be pushing at around 7,000 miles per hour. Please excuse the American speed, but that's essentially what we're talking about, escape velocity here. So we want to be pushing at escape velocity down so that we can get the rocket up and away from Earth's gravity, at least. Since this rocket follows a ballistic trajectory, we don't need speeds quite that high. So we're not going to try to break away from Earth's gravity. We're simply going to go up to about past the Kármán line, around 300,000 or 400,000 feet. It's roughly 100,000 meters of altitude, and then just fall right back to Earth again. With that, I think I just forgot your question. Oh, please.
The question was, how does the fuel not ignite? But then you explained.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
no oxidizer.
Yes. So we either have it. So we have regions of extremely fuel rich or extremely fuel poor areas that we can control. So we can control the mixture and in the edges, and that keeps that section cool.
Super cool. Wow.
I know the entire idea. One of the primary things that you mentioned about Blue Origin and other spacefaring companies is you want everything to be as reusable as possible. But what parts are not reusable? There's what's it called? Pad consumables, which is I've heard Tori Bruno from United ULA. He mentioned pad consumables is the term referring to all the things at a launch pad that just get destroyed when you launch a rocket, and those things have to be replaced. And they're also, I'm wondering what parts, how much of a Blue Origin launch site, which is not a huge site, it's like some scaffolding next to a rocket.
Exactly.
And
I've had the pleasure of
Yeah, go on.
So I've had the pleasure of walking around the launch site,
Lucky.
and what happens is there's the things that are closest to the rocket are a set of hydraulically operated clamps, and these clamps hold the rocket down to do something very interesting called the built-in test of the engine. So when we command engine start, the engine goes from zero thrust to in about a half a second to full thrust, but we don't let go of the rocket. The reason is we're trying to make a measurement of the rocket's ability to lift off the pad prior to allowing the rocket to leave. Once we've achieved the minimum thrust parameter, and we're otherwise what we call within the red lines being the allowable parameters of operation. Once we agree that the engine is producing the appropriate amount of thrust, then the clamps let go. Now those clamps catch fire and stay, and they're still like a flaming inferno long after the rocket has finished its trip. But otherwise, that's about the only thing I've seen that might be consumables, and so there's some maintenance that has to occur. But the pad's steel, and yes, the steel gets very, very hot. But otherwise, the structure stays the same. Sometimes we paint the pad so it looks real nice prior to the launch, and the paint gets ripped off. And we do have to do maintenance on the hydraulics that are around there. Other things are attached to the scaffolding. So, for example, the umbilical that provides the fueling for the tanks, that will be removed and pulled back very quickly as the rocket begins its ascent. And in fact, those don't get pulled until the rocket begins its ascent. So it's sort of a rocket thrust activated. So all of that. But to answer more directly, we have very few things on the pad that get damaged. We actually get more damage on the return back. So we have this huge feather on the ground, well away from the launch pad. And this has a guided descent, so it knows where it's going. It's going to go straight to where it needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it gets close to the pad, it activates its engine at about 2,000 feet. So the engine is active, and the engine slows down the rocket. Now, the great news is we're not full of propellant anymore, so we have a lot less weight. And so the propellant is a consumable. And then as we approach, the rocket the thrust vector correction on the main engine activates to make sure the rocket comes to where it needs to come. And then we finally deploy the legs. Those legs are not deployed, but they're shown deployed in this model. Then we deploy the legs, and then the rocket touches down. But prior to touchdown, we'd say we're about 50 feet up above the ground, or about, I'd say, 20, 25, I'd say 14 or 15 meters above the ground is when the legs are deployed. Then the rocket starts finding its way, and then it sort of drops at about 5 feet per second. And then it just makes a nice soft landing with little compression points here. The rocket looks horrible. It's charred, it's burnt, it's gotten hot from re-entry. We don't even paint it. It just looks darker the next time we fly it.
It's basically like seasoning a cast iron pan, except with a giant rocket.
Yeah, at the 25th time, it's probably pretty dark, but there will be a checkout of the hydraulic systems, the batteries. So this uses a battery powered hydraulic pump, and so we charge the batteries. We verify the batteries are good. We check and see if there's any hydraulic leaks. Maybe we even change the hydraulic fluid. I'm not sure if the hydraulic fluid gets reused. My guess is it gets replaced.
Mm-hmm.
So, but those are about the only consumables. This is a hydrolox engine, so hydrogen and oxygen. It's not the best choice for ISP. It's not the best fuel for doing what it does. But the goal was not to make this rocket just a tourism rocket. It was to make it a demonstration of technologies that could be used for launching a rocket from the moon. Because on the moon, when we mine regolith, we also have access to ice, and we have the ability to do hydrolysis and to have refueling capabilities for a rocket of this type.
Incredible. Let's just take a quick pause there, and we'll be right back after this to hear more about the plans for in situ mining on the moon for rocket purposes.
That'd be awesome.
All right.
Actually, push pause. All right.
The pause function exists. Yes.
Hey.
We're here with our first guest of the season, Dimos, who's been telling us about the incredible work that he does and that the team at Blue Origin are doing. I mean, it's so fascinating to think about the fact that not just run before you can crawl, but figure out how we can apply these technologies to mining and creating the necessary in situ resources on the moon for launches from the moon before you've even launched from Earth. It's so fascinating that was, I had no idea that was what was kind of driving the approach. Wow.
Yeah, surprising to us too. I mean, as an engineer, you're just introduced, say, this is the rocket you're going to work on, go do this and that.
Mhm.
And then eventually, once you're working there for a while, you start to ask, well, as you learn about rockets, you're like, this is a totally inappropriate design for an earthbound rocket to do tourism. Why did you choose this fuel? Why did you choose this engine design? And then you find out, okay, so we're trying to get double duty out of our investment.
That's actually very clever.
Yeah.
And then, how far away is Blue Origin's Blue Moon lander from being ready to go?
Is that the name?
Well, I've got some updates for that.
Ooh.
So we've got an interesting change. When I was working at Blue Origin, so right now I'm not at Blue Origin anymore. I'm working with an aerospace company, and we can talk about that later. But I still stay in touch with my Blue Origin peeps. And New Glenn is still scheduled to fly at the end of 2024. And that's an exciting rocket. It's huge. It's 330 feet or 100 meters tall. This rocket is only about 10 meters tall, 15 meters tall for this rocket. So to just give you an idea of the scale, New Glenn would carry this as a payload to the moon if it needed to. Just to give you an idea of the kind of capability, and fully loaded. I mean, New Glenn has the ability to launch, to take about 1 million pounds up into space.
Nothing. That's nothing.
So, like a Greyhound bus, for example, which is just sort of a classic analogy we use in America. But a large tourist bus could be loaded into the payload bay of New Glenn for a trip to the moon. Yeah, I know it is, and so the Mark 1 lander is still a little bit away. I would say probably look for it in about the next 3 years. Some of the initial design work has been done. It's not going to be on the first group of things that go to the moon. We've got the Artemis mission. We've got obviously Orion, and there's going to be like the trips around the moon first, just to see the moon, to say that you've been there, which is not bad to have on your resume.
I wouldn't mind.
Hey, that's what NASA had to do. Everyone had to do it. You have to prove you can get there.
Exactly.
Then prove you can come back.
But the manned missions on the moon are going to involve a number of things, and one of those is to evaluate what we can do about setting up an infrastructure, because the whole point of the return to moon is we're going back to stay, and that's kind of the tagline. So the ability to do that is going to require, one, deploying solar energy assets, networking, communication. We've got one group that's working on a railroad on the moon.
Of course.
And that'll be melting the lunar regolith and turning it into track. We've got groups that are working on deployable solar panels that will, and this was actually, I think in Ars Technica, there was an article about honeybee robotics that was going to be putting a deployable solar panel on the moon. And those will be at a place, in order to get access to full coverage and not have a long lunar night, which is 14 days, is to go on one of the poles. And when you're at the pole, you can deploy an antenna really tall. And it doesn't matter that the moon is spinning and you have a day or a night. You're out of that shadow. You're constantly able. You just turn, or you have a cylindrical solar panel. And you just capture energy that way.
Oh, that's intense.
So it's going to be a very exciting next group of years, and we've got a lot going on. But
Yeah.
I'd say the next 3 years, and certainly this year is going to be exciting because we're going to have a couple of missions. Now, the Peregrine lander didn't make it. It had a
No.
propulsion failure,
Right.
and it was very sad. And it's the third attempt by private organizations to get to the moon, and in all three attempts, we've had failures. Um, Peregrine, however, flew on a Blue Origin powered rocket.
The Vulcan?
Yes, Vulcan Centaur ran on two BE-4 engines that were built in the factory.
No kidding.
While I was watching those engines, and I was very excited about it because I had a hand in designing the engine controllers for those engines, and and it's America's ride to space. That's what they call the BE-4. The BE-4 is designed to do something which was very unpopular. ULA decided to use Russian rocket engines, so they resurrected this ancient bunch of engines that were built in the 60s and 70s, the RD-180, which had been powering the Delta Heavies and the Atlas rockets up until now. And finally, they ran out of engines because this was all very old-fashioned technologies built on uh, pressure regulators. It looked like a auto body shop's acetylene torch. That was what the controller looked like on the RD-180. And the BE-4 naturally has, the latest and greatest high-tech uh, computational resources, if you
Sure.
will, running it. And the exciting thing is we've been able, as a company at Blue Origin, to make a huge uh, achievement. It took a long time to get that engine designed and built. And when an engine like that explodes on a test stand, when you're in early stage development, it's like a small nuclear weapon going off. These engines have access to a lot of firepower, and so it's kind of scary to keep that engine running. I mean, it's just designed to generate a half a million pounds of thrust. So each, yeah. I mean, now the engine here is no slouch. It's doing
No.
100,000 to 130,000. So, but
Wow.
yeah,
I
yeah,
had no idea that the Vulcan was on those engines. That's
yeah.
fantastic.
Two of them.
Yeah.
So it
Wow.
gives you an idea of what we're lifting.
I think it's really fascinating, and I'll say something that's a little bit well, not controversial per se, but I'll often have friends or family members bugging me about, well, if the moon landings were real, why has it taken so long for us to get back there? And I think that besides obviously the politics and the bureaucracy, it's really fascinating to see that you know once the decision was made to make this the goal for the space industry, it's been, let's not recreate the way that we did it last time, but let's do everything better. As you were saying, it's forward thinking in terms of in situ creation of resources and infrastructure. It's making sure that the launch systems are more efficient. It's kind of mind blowing, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Apollo missions only went there for what, uh, a day or two, and I
Right.
think the Mark II is the Blue Origins Mark II is supposed to be there for like 30 days. It's supposed to be able to last house 4 people for like a month.
I think so. I think it's a couple of weeks. I got to tell you
Wow.
though, I do not know if I would want to be on that rocket. So here's why. So take this space, put yourself in maybe. So you'll need 5 people minimum for a mission, and here's why. You're going to have an EVA of 3 people on this moon surface.
Mm-hmm.
Then you need one mission specialist inside the capsule handling communications to the people doing the extravehicular activity. Then you'll have another mission specialist handling telemetry and communications to the Earth, and as well as to whatever orbiting assets you have around the moon. So you need a pretty big team. You need 5 people. The space is tiny, and and part of that space is for dealing with putting your suit on and off. And so imagine you're essentially standing up, by the way, in this for 2 weeks. There aren't many seats, and when you lie down, you simply just have a wall that reclines a little bit. Um, you're going to have no privacy, by the way, and wet wipes are going to be your shower. The toilet, it's a prison toilet. It's right there. And right beside the toilet is a communication station. And right beside the communication station is the food station and the science station. And that's where you stand in your off time when you're not doing EVAs. So it's going to take that first group is going to be quite heroic, I will say. This is going to make this look like a luxury car.
I believe the first Apollo mission, not a lot of people speak about it or know about it, but when they came back, the astronauts said, "Well, it's gross in there," because they didn't really have all the technology in place yet to handle. They didn't really foresee how well human waste can escape packaging and just meander about a cabin. So there have been a great many leaps forward in that regard, but the no privacy bit is okay. I'll wait for the next one. I'll call them and tell them I'll take the next flight.
Apparently, the number one thing you discover if you ever get a ride to the ISS is as soon as you open the door and you get out of your Soyuz capsule to get in, is the intense stench of urine that hits your face, like
Yes.
as you get attacked by urine.
Right. There's I forget the name of the astronaut who said it, but he has a famous line about the International Space Station is yesterday's coffee is tomorrow's coffee.
Yeah.
Because the coffee you drink is made with recycled fluids, and it's technically very clean and it works, and that's why we're up there for 20 plus years without stopping. However,
and we haven't even talked about all the biological effects. One interesting story that Jerry Linenger wrote about in his time on Mir, where he spent, I think, 9 months on the Mir space station, so we're going way back now, was that he would sleep in the lead acid battery compartment, which was the energy storage elements for the Mir. And the reason he would do that was because the cosmic rays would ruin his ability to fall asleep. Because when he would close his eyes, he would see contrails of the charged particles formed in his retina.
No. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
And we'll have plenty of that. Now, the moon, fortunately, is a lower radiation environment than one would expect. And part of that is because of its proximity to the Earth. However, once you get to Mars, all bets are off. And it's a pretty high radiation environment out there relative to the Earth.
So I think,
and one thing that we haven't fully discussed in our trip to Mars.
From memory, so I think I was at a talk given by the CEO of STEMRAD, the organization they designed both radiation suits and radiation vests for people working in certain environments that require that protective gear on Earth, but also for astronauts. And they've done some really cool work on tailoring the design of radiation suits. I think they call AstroRad, to actually protect the more or less sensitive organs on both men and women. And they were also working, I think, with the Orion mission. And one of the things that I remember from them mentioning was not only the suits, but to have a water storage layer that would have not quite a basement, but like a storage layer underneath it. And basically, in the event of a solar radiation event or a coronal mass ejection, they could basically retreat under this layer of water storage as a means of protection from the energetic particles. Is that kind of the sort of direction that we're thinking?
In the suit or in the habitat that they're in?
Both, actually. But yeah, the suit would be heavy, but the habitat would use its stored water as shielding.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So the same approach.
Now, that doesn't work for everything. Like, it doesn't work as well for photons, but it works extremely well for neutrons.
Yeah.
So, for example, you can stand over an operating nuclear reactor running at 100% power with just a foot of water between you and the core, and you would not notice a single bit of additional radiation above background. So water is amazing in terms of protecting you from from those situations. And because it's also a resource that you're going to want to carry with you anyway, it gets double duty. It's one of the reasons the planet Earth is so great. We need to take care of the planet.
It's a pretty nice planet. I like it. Yeah.
That's where all the tacos are. That we
Yeah.
know of.
That we know of.
Pulled pork tacos.
You mentioned that Mars is a high radiation environment. Is it? But it has an atmosphere. Does it make it? Would the moon be more of a radiation environment than Mars?
I think so. The reason the moon is essentially protected by this magnetic shadow of the Earth. So the sun, the Earth, and the moon create sort of this twin that, because of its interactions, gravitational and magnetic, you get a little bit of benefit. There is no benefit from the atmosphere on Mars, and so even the Earth gets bombarded by cosmic rays continuously, and some of those cosmic rays make it to the Earth's surface. But in fact, it's a big enough issue that aircraft that fly above 36,000 feet have to be radiation rated for their avionics. That is not the case for terrestrial grade avionics. So when we talk about that, for example, we say, a trip across the Atlantic is equivalent to 50 chest X-rays, just to give you an idea of how much radiation you get. And it's not really like you're going that high up. You're only going up to 36,000 feet, which is also the height, roughly, of Mount Everest. But it just gives you an idea of how important the atmosphere is, and water, right? Because we have a lot of water in our atmosphere, and that's part of that protective layer.
That's insane. What? That's a lot of X-rays just flying across the Atlantic.
I mean, I'm just wondering, cost-wise, with medical insurance these days, which is cheaper, flying across the Atlantic or getting 50 chest X-rays?
True, but when you think about the ability of humans to recover from radiation, it's actually quite amazing. That doesn't mean that we don't have long-term damage due to it. Radiation doesn't damage DNA directly. Radiation actually causes oxidation to occur, and that's why we take antioxidants to help reverse the effects of oxidation. And it's the oxidized material inside the cell that attack the DNA, not the radiation itself, which is something that a lot of people don't realize.
What? I just learned how radiation. I'm so happy right now. I just learned how radiation works.
Oh, that's amazing. I have a question kind of out of left field. I mean, you're clearly a really brilliant person, and you have this deep understanding of science and engineering, and you've worked both on electronic components and kind of more oil and grease type engineering projects as well. I mean, you mentioned that you were at Virginia Polytech, but I'm curious, do you look at something in how you got to where you're at today and say, wow, that was not how people normally do it? Was there something non-traditional in your path to get here, or do you think you kind of did things by the book?
I think whenever you're a consultant and you're open to new ideas, you're sort of closing the typical career book, because it's very easy to sort of just take a job out of school and stick with that job, and then maybe stay with that job for 5 years and find a new job and stay with that job for 5 years. And that's great. And jobs generally will steer you in the direction they need you, because you're an asset. The instant you take yourself out of that, that's when you go from being an asset to being a free agent. And so, I mean, I looked to find stuff that I enjoyed to do. And one of the things you learn, I got my PhD in electrical engineering. I was always told, don't do it unless you really love it, because if you don't love it, you're not going to survive it. And I will say this, I love, for example, solar power, but there's something called the solar roller coaster if you're in the business. And the roller coaster is this emotional change that occurs through the ups and downs of the business, and alternative energy has those. I think right now everyone's thinking about climate differently, especially since 2023 was such a record busting year, and the climate changes will be with us for a very long time. It's certainly just the effects of 2023, and we are only starting 2024. Who knows what surprises we have in store? But those, if you put yourself in the areas of research that you're excited about and you're passionate about, I mean, I don't know how to answer the question about like what like unexpected. I guess for me, I just try to make my own path. So that should be my answer. I just tried to make my own path, and I didn't just work for companies. I said, forget it, I'm doing my own thing. That's scary because you have to have some sort of credibility. Um, there are things like you can apply for various grants that government's giving out money to do research. You can just call up. I mean, if you're young and you're an engineer, you're lucky, right? Because you've got two things going for you. You're trainable and you can do stuff on a moment's notice. Maybe you haven't had time to start a family yet, so you can have crazy hours. Maybe you just go on Hackaday and build crazy stuff and show it off on the website, and people kind of get interested in what you do. And maybe your interest is in building airplane motors, and now all of a sudden an electric airplane company is like, hey, would you like to work on our electric airplane? And then all of a sudden you have a consulting job with an electric airplane company like I have right now. So and so that's what's going on is you pick you pick something, you let people know about it, and then all of a sudden you got more work than you know what to do with.
Fantastic. I like that. And yeah, I like what you said about kind of forging your own path. I think that was the main reason I asked the question, because I know that a lot of people tend to get very worked up about, not ticking the right boxes of a traditional path, and stressing out about that sort of thing. And so I'm glad you said what you said. Benjamin, was there something else you wanted to ask before we wrap things up?
Um, I do have one kind of question I'd like to ask. It's about the public perception of a manned mission back to the moon. We've already had um, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins make the first landing on the moon and come back, and there was the ticker tape parade, and they were international celebrities for years. And um, we have since done it a few more times, and nobody's gone back. Conspiracy theorists abound because of it. And uh, do you think that sending people back to the moon and, oh, God willing, back home again is going to
Yes.
be answered with as much fanfare? Or it's just going to be like, all right, well, yeah, we went to the moon before, big deal. I'm hoping for the first. I hope they come back to just celebrity status. Do you think that would be a big thing?
I think it comes to the innate human need for pushing ourselves to the limit, whether it's the Olympics or scientific achievement, um, or literary. There's just the ability to wow each other and to do something special is um, is is a very deeply satisfying human part of our existence. The ability to show off that we've been able to achieve something. Um, as far as what the world needs now, it's probably not a lot of money and energy used to spend to go to the moon. We should invest it in better political solutions, better scientific solutions to help climate change, maybe to improve access to clean drinking water, and some of the issues that will occur as our climate makes those things more difficult. Um, and And for example, I'm very excited about technology that's going to space that, frankly, I think will be used on the Earth. And here's an example, right? The Apollo missions were all about the technologies that we developed to go to the moon made our life on Earth better, and it's true. We did not have worldwide radio and signaling networks until Apollo. Apollo invented the internet. How could you have the ability to track a space capsule orbiting the Earth? In the 1950s, we were doing this with the Mercury and Gemini missions, and we were able to establish continuous links, moving data around the world in a time when people just owning a radio was a novelty. And that was something the Apollo program brought. And no one would have even imagined how the technologies have changed us now. And those were inspired by and accelerated by going to the moon then. The kind of technological challenges we're going to have on the moon are amazing. And I think something like plasma waste gasification, where we take the trash we create and we put it into a reactor that's at the temperature of the sun's surface, and we turn that trash, all those broken up bottle bits, into hydrogen gas. Done. That
Done.
we do it right. We put it on our Earth, and all of a sudden we turn our waste into clean energy. That's the kind of innovation I'm hoping that we're going to get by going to the moon.
Wow.
That sounds insanely inspiring and hopeful. I love that. Look at Kavi, just dreaming.
Oh, I'm just thinking of how similar what you described is to the fusion engine on the DeLorean in the movie Back to the Future, which is basically like chuck in the garbage and use it to power. Like, it's in a sci-fi sense, we have known that this is the solution for decades. It's just so great to see that it's tangible, it's right around the corner, and as you said, we're finding ways to solve these problems in space that will in turn solve a lot of problems for us here on Earth. Amazing. It's really great.
Love it. Well, this was great.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been a joy.
Oh, dude, you're coming
Thank
back,
you.
whether you know it or not. It's happening. You're
I'm
coming
looking
back.
forward to it. We've got so much to talk about.
I know this has already
I
been.
can talk to you about electric vehicle charging standards, or hybrid electric aircraft that take off on 150 feet of runway.
I would. Yeah, we need to have you back. This has already been our longest episode yet, and we could do another 2 hours just on
easily.
This. Gosh, wow. If people want to find you online to I don't know, follow the things that you're posting or read things that you've written, or perhaps listen to any podcasts that you might recommend, where can folks find you?
Well, LuxeSci podcast or erevnamedia.com is the website that my wife and I have, which provides all of the direct links to the posts that we've done. I have lately not been blogging or posting as much as others. For me, creating the podcast, the LuxeSci podcast, has been sort of my contribution. But I would say that listen to the podcast. We do have a couple of episodes where we talk about rockets. I think this has been the most fun and the most. It's great to geek out with people who love rockets, and you'll hear a little bit of that on the LuxeSci podcast. But I think you guys, it's going to be even at the next level. So I'm really excited. This is kind of so I'd say go there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can friend me on LinkedIn. I don't post that much. It's embarrassing, but I have been posting lately on about my exciting work with Electra Aero. So follow me as we develop the next generation of hybrid electric short takeoff aircraft.
Wow,
done.
Fantastic. Cool. For folks listening at home who want to find Benjamin, where can the good folks find you, Benjamin?
As always, everybody on the internet, just follow Science Actually. primarily on Facebook, but you can also find us on Twitter, Mastodon, Hive, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, LinkedIn. I just post there every single day. Don't tell anyone
That's
it's copy and
great.
paste. Don't tell anyone it's copy and paste. It's
You
original
guys are
content for each
superheroes.
social media. How about you, Cobbs? Covey?
You can find me on all the good and all the bad social media platforms at Fun Fact Science. I think the only one you didn't mention was Blue Sky, where the skies are bluer and the
Oh
grass
yeah,
is
I'm there
greener.
too.
No, too late. I claimed it. It's mine.
All right.
But
Blue Sky
yes,
belongs to Covey.
you can find us on all the aforementioned social medias. Have a listen to old episodes and new episodes as they come out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else you get your podcasts from. And don't forget to check out LuxeSci as well. Thank
Absolutely.
you again, Dimos, for being with us, and we will definitely have you back for another episode.
So excited.
Ah,
All right,
thank you
guys.
very much.
Get ready to be wowed.
Oh.
Fantastic.